For those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God. The Spirit you receive does not make you slaves, so that you live in fear again. Rather, the Spirit you received brought about your adoption into sonship. And by him we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. Now, if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ. If indeed we share in his sufferings in order that we may also share in his glory.
Thank you. Good morning. We've just listened to a reading or rendering of, by Poetry in Motion, of a poem by Antonio Machado, and he repeats a line 4 times. And last time he does it, he says, "Last night as I was sleeping, I dreamt marvelous error. I had God here inside my heart." Reminding us, I guess, that at the heart of the Christian faith is a gift or an invitation to a shared life, to the shared life of God and their freshness and their vitality. This is good news, and it is marvelous, and it's still, from time to time, difficult to believe. We're in the middle of a series on the Holy Spirit, and today is an Ancient Practices Sunday, so we're going to try and tie these together or create some sort of cocktail. Choose your metaphor as you wish. For me, this series has asked the question, what of the person and experience of the Holy Spirit has made inroads into me? What has been helpful? From one angle, I'm going to be talking about a bird, a colour, and a set of a table and chairs. The subject is the indwelling spirit. And I think it was Philip Yancey who said that when an invisible spirit and a human being connect, strange things may happen. That prospect terrifies some people, embarrasses others, and captivates still others. And that's our territory this morning. We're going to be looking at the interplay between God and ourselves, what those interactions might look like, and along what channels the Holy Spirit may be coming to us. We're going to be offering some questions that may help open our hearts and folding this all into an ancient practice, communion. Now, I wonder how we each picture and imagine the Holy Spirit, part of the Godhead, part of the Trinity. Maybe we can start simply by taking some of what the Bible offers and move on from there. So, for example, we're offered for God, Father, and Brother. In terms of the Holy Spirit, that could be gathered into one word as friend, which I really like. We're also offered aspects of the feminine and of mother. At a further glance, the Holy Spirit can be trying to describe in terms of a creature, a colour, and a community. And it's these that I'm going to look at and wondering what they might tell us about God and how we might relate to God. So here we are. Let's have a look at the next slide, please, John. So the first one is creature. Last night, as I was sleeping, I dreamt, marvelous error, that it was God I had here inside my heart. Holy Spirit, is God here inside my heart? Simple and profound. Thank you, Mr. Poet. And there's ground here for meditation on each one of these words. We're not going to do that, but I would recommend that just on that one line. But moving on. The Holy Spirit is, as you know, described in Genesis 1 as creatively hovering over the as yet unformed earth and brooding over Mary in Luke chapter 1 and Matthew 1 and over Jesus in Matthew 3 in his baptism by John. A dove has been frequently imagined and painted as in slides fresco here. Each of those scenes stresses new beginnings and attentive presence, gestation and growth. So there's strong hints here of nurture, of care and initiation. At each faith and life stage, we too have new beginnings. They might be to do with a new orientation, there might be a new disorientation, there might be a new job, it might be a new relationship or a new motivation. I think you'll agree we can reasonably expect God to be all over those new beginnings in our lives. Let's take our first look at the Romans 8 passage. For those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God. The Spirit you received does not make you slaves. So the Spirit leads and is received. This leading does not involve coercion, but consent. And I think this is one of the things that has been quite a key word for me, gathered momentum over the years. It's a bit like a font that's grown size and size. Some other words to describe the Holy Spirit are comforter, helper, counselor, which should give us a clue as to what kind of personality and what kind of engagement we should be expecting. Kirsty and I are fans of a US TV show called West Wing. It's about the inner workings of the White House. And we have flogged these DVDs mercilessly for over 10 years. And we just finished watching the cycle yet again. Have they a life, I hear you say? I don't know. So there is a spoiler on the horizon here. There are earplugs at the back if you want them, or you can maybe put a finger in your ear, preferably your own fingers. There's been a long-running on-off relationship between a White House reporter called Danny and the press secretary, CJ, Claudia Jean. And here she's faced with a decision to follow a new story, which is to take up a major position in the new administration or to take $10 billion from a rich businessman to solve a single world problem. But does commitment to this relationship, which Danny has proposed, feature? She hadn't expected it to be a thing, and admits she's not good at maintaining a relationship. She fears she's missed a window to figure out how to share a life. And in this scene, Danny replies, "You're right, you're not good at it. You need help. We'll work it out. You can be scared, that's okay. But you're not going to walk away from me because you're scared. I'm not that scary." It's that last line, I'm just not that scary. We've got comforter, helper, counselor. There's no consent without trust. And as in any relationship, this will need to involve some self as well as other awareness. There needs to be openness to God to enter one's life. Let the heart yield to the voice of God, I heard Louise saying last week. That's more than some initial decision. It's an ongoing choice, a relational need and desire. As I said earlier, God makes his home in us as we make our home in him. And any changes in me, in us, will come about not as a result of coercion from the outside, but by a spirit working from within, summoning up new life, transforming from the inside out. At points, on a daily basis, or even at crucial points in life, we're ultimately invited to say our yeses, to say hello to the new and goodbye to the old. And I can't tell you what that looks like for you or how you might express that. Sometimes it may be a word, an orientation, maybe a posture or a breath prayer or a word prayer like "Come, Holy Spirit." Sometimes it's a yes directly towards God, might be a yes towards life or yes towards a person. Look at Romans again, verse 15. The Spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship. And I think many of us will know that under Roman adoption, the life and standing of the adopted child changed completely. The adopted son lost all rights in his old family and gained new rights in his new family. The old life of the adopted son was completely wiped out, with all debts being cancelled, with nothing from his past counting against him anymore. And I'm increasingly asking myself each week in situations about my reactions, I'm asking, what story am I telling myself here? Romans 8 and its talk of adoption reminds me to say yes to a new story. So some questions. So when I consider the dove as a picture of the Holy Spirit, I think, what yes is asked of me? Is there something being birthed in me? Is a new course being set? Really, can I say yes and consent to the surprising, possibly surprising and strange leading? And for me, that invariably starts with an ill-formed sense which grows and takes shape as I say my yeses. For me, that's typically through a physical prayer. It's like saying my yes through my in-breath. So as I'm breathing in, I'm taking into myself the breath of God that he may intermingle with my soul. So that's creature. Let's move on to color, please. Last night, as I was sleeping, I dreamt marvelous error that a spring was breaking out in my heart. I said, along which secret aqueduct, O water, are you coming to me, water of a new life? Energy is clearly evident in the elements of water, of wind, of fire, and also with vegetation, which are used to picture the Spirit of God. And these are essential for life. They also retain a wild edge. I wonder what color we each associate with the Holy Spirit, if at all. There may be an argument for blue for water, orange for fire, or green for vegetation. And it's this last one that's probably got my attention the most. It's green life force. I don't know where that came from. As you know, there are a number of parables in the gospel about contrasting wise and foolish. I have been given this plant to look after, whilst a colleague is on holiday and are charged with meeting its every need. It looks healthy and vibrant, and yet I feel like one of those kids who has been left at home by their parents who are on holiday. And I'm thinking, I know some animal or some pet is not going to come out of this deal very well. I'll have to buy a new one, a replica. And I don't know what type of plant this is. So if anyone can tell me, that will be really, really helpful. I think of the word viriditas. It's a term coined by Hildegard of Bingen. It literally means greenness, as in vitality, lushness, or growth. Hildegard used it to refer to an aspect of the divine nature. Greenness, freshness is indigenous to the person of God. For Hildegard, the Holy Spirit is the greening power in motion, giving life to all things. And to her, Jesus is greenness incarnate. Last week, I noticed in Blackwell, I was in the bookshop just down the road here, a sumptuous red hardback book on the life of Hildegard. Frustratingly, it was wrapped in cellophane, and I kid you not, it just shouted at me, precious, expensive, run along. So I had to just run along and just leave it there. So Hildegard is some person with quite some CV. She was a 12th century German living on the banks of the Rhine, taking in the rich green landscape about her. She founded Benedictine communities, and this photo here on the slide is a sculpture of her in the grounds of Eibingen Abbey, which she herself founded. She was made a doctor of the church by Pope Benedict in 2012, And I also read that she was the only medieval woman who preached openly before mixed audiences of laity and clergy with the approval of church authorities. She authored the first known morality play and was the only 12th century playwright who was not anonymous. As a composer, she was the first we know anything about biographically. As a scientist, she was the first to discuss sexuality and gynecology from a female perspective. Now, it wouldn't surprise me to learn she also could do 50 keepy uppies and had a really serviceable backhand. There are, as you know, some people who are a gift to us all because of the range of energies, interests and skills, and I have to confess that I sometimes just want to give them a wee kick. Just a cheeky one, nothing excessive, you understand, just out of sheer jealousy. There's a lot to admire about Hildegard, but it's particularly about her emphasis on the Holy Spirit and also her lyrics. And that's what's particularly relevant here. So if you allow me, I'm going to read out some of her writings. They're actually printed on card in front of you. I'm just going to read some of hers. This is called Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, giving life to all, moving all creatures, root of all things, washing them clean, wiping out their mistakes, healing their wounds. You are our true life, luminous, wonderful, awakening the heart from its ancient sleep. And then there's antiphon for the Holy Spirit, antiphon being a short song, I believe. The Spirit of God is a life that bestows life, root of world tree and wind in its boughs. Scrubbing out sin, she rubs oil into wounds. She is glistening life, alluring all praise, all awakening, all resurrecting. Let's turn to Romans again. Romans verse 16 says, the Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we're God's children. There's something perhaps of a tennis match here, toing and froing, back and forth between initiation and consent, yes and yes both ways. And I appreciate Hildegard expanding for me the essence of testify to include whispering, washing, cleansing, all describing the interplay of Christ, the Spirit, and the whole human beings. But there's another color that has got my attention, and that is grayness. Grayness is, for me, times of aridity and uncertainty, of boredom and moodiness. And I'm going to introduce another term that might be unfamiliar. It's an ancient word that has made a return courtesy of the writings of Kathleen Norris. The term is acedia. It means torpor, despair, and the refusal of joy. I hear echoes of this when reading of the contemporary experiences of young people who despair for their futures, and in the confessions of jaded believers as well, I would say. It's lethargy, it's listlessness, and a lack of care that takes a grip. From Hildegard, we get greenness and overflow, an overflow that extends beyond difficult times, towards difficult times, to include difficult times, not contained only within good times. There's no place our beloved is not flowing, as one writer puts it. And I want to acknowledge this kind of territory between the grayness and greenness. There's a poem called The Flower by George Herbert, a man who recognized seasons of life, seasons of faith, seasons of the soul. And in this poem, is both in his confession. And I think it provides a really good illustration. This is The Flower by George Herbert. How fresh, O Lord, how sweet and clean are thy returns. even as the flowers in spring. Grief melts away like snow in May, as if there were no such cold thing. Who would have thought my shriveled heart could have recovered greenness? It was gone, quite underground, as flowers depart. And now in age, but again, after so many deaths, I live and write. I once more smell the dew and rain and relish versing. Kathleen Norris noticed that, or discovered that what helped her with greyness was three things. For her, it was walking, it was spiritual direction, and it was baking. Some questions here. Have you noticed what enlivens you and when the world goes grey for you? Along what channels or aqueduct does the Spirit of God come to you? For me, these two come hand in hand. I notice an internal coolness. The sun's gone, the sky is now grey, and I go and do a wee check on the usual suspects. Am I taking myself too seriously? Am I taking my life too seriously? Am I reading poetry? Have I been out for a green-filled walk? I think Louise's words, stay close, be found, is sage advice when we experience greyness descending. And I also say there's a simple prayer here, which I found very helpful, and it is this: Lord of life, give to my roots rain. So it's creature, colour, and now community. Turning again to Romans 8, now verse 17. Now if we're children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory. Hildegard says of the Spirit, you are our true life. Oneness, naturalness, and belonging are our messages. We're children of God. We don't have to wonder or think ourselves into it. We just are. We don't need to clench, to push, or to grab our way into a new family. When I married, I joined a new family, the McKeans. Their dining habits, when we all got together, and there were quite a number of us, were very different from my family's. And I'm going to leave some silence there just so you can imagine what that could possibly mean. In electrical terms, I'm not sure if this metaphor works. It's a bit like a serial circuit as opposed to a parallel circuit. In my family, one person would speak and everyone else would listen. Neat, orderly, polite, possibly sedate. In Kirsty's, it was all arms and legs and talking over each other. It was like a scrum, which was a shock for me because there was no safety net for this new poor incomer. But somehow or other, the thought had got into my head that I am part of the family. I didn't need to try to be part of the family. I already was. And that thought was actually enormously helpful. Now, the good purpose of God is not only to give us life, but to fill us with his life. The end game, or an aim, is shared life, the life of Jesus, in its pain and its joys, experienced as one with the Father, without the illusion of separation. It's a sympathetic, symbiotic, true union. And when you get the Spirit, you get Jesus and the Father at the same time. So note in the Romans 8 passage here, all the Trinity are brought in. And so we come to the table. And if the stewards can start giving out bread and wine together, and if we can hold off eating and drinking them for a bit, that'll be helpful. We're a bit short of stewards. If anyone can help Andy distribute them, that would be really appreciated. Thank you. Yes, if we can just hold off on taking bread and wine just now, I'll say when we should do that. So we're invited to full participation, having a place at the table as co-heirs with Christ. This picture here is by Bridget Braybooks, who was a priest at St. Peter's just around the corner. She lived in Lawton Place. And there are echoes here of Rublev's Trinity icon, which you're probably quite familiar with. Love the contemporary feel to this, the domestic feel to it, and it contains, again, the same message of invitation. A life is shared, a life is given. This is gift and invitation, the core of the Christian faith. At communion, we have a sort of a reset option here. What is it of or from the life of God that you need? Vitality, wisdom, compassion. This is offered and shared with us. Take what you need, says God. Take me into yourself. Let me be a part of you. Take of me what you need. It's a life given then by Jesus, and it's a shared life that's given now by the Trinity and mediated by the Holy Spirit. Now, if you've ever wondered what we're doing, what am I supposed to do or could be doing in bread and wine, then following from this talk, in this context, I would say, I'm taking Christ into myself. I'm saying my yes. I'm saying my yes to union, yes to breaking the illusion of separation, to breaking the illusion of the debit, credit, accounting style of relationship. I'm saying yes to adoption, yes to being led, yes to accompaniment, to closeness, to being a child of God. So taking bread and wine can be a part of consenting to what comes from the hand of God at the table of God. We might be saying this in our heads sometimes. We might be singing some of this. But the central act, let's remember, is a physical act. It is simply ingesting. It's eating and drinking. And in so doing, we reaffirm that Christianity is a material faith. It's incarnation, it's flesh and blood, bones, eating, drinking. It's physical, creation-based, with a new earth and a new resurrection body on the horizon. So after we take bread and wine, there's space within this context to consider the questions that I've posed and which are echoes, I think, of the Sunday question. So it's like Mary, like Jesus. Is there a yes that you're being invited to say? A yes to a new beginning, a new story? Is there some yielding or some softening that can happen now? And along what aqueduct or channel is the Holy Spirit coming to you? Do you know when grayness occurs? Ask, listen, get to know the ways of God with you and learn. So let's eat and drink now, ask and listen. We can ask the band to come up just now, please. So just by way as a brief summary then, the Holy Spirit is God on the inside, a resident, indwelling God, here to stay, live, and move around in and amongst us. The Holy Spirit is the breath, the touch, the sense, the smell, the sensation of God in our day, in our body, in our imagination, awakening us, growing us into his likeness. He is God, joining us to God, that we share their life.